your body rarely breaks down in a dramatic moment. Instead, it is quietly shaped by the small decisions you repeat each day. The sleep you postpone, the movement you avoid, the stress you ignore, and the nourishment you compromise. Beneath your awareness, cells respond to every habit, hormones adjust to every routine, and your nervous system records every pattern, slowly transforming temporary choices into lasting biological realities. What feels harmless in a single moment can, through repetition, become a silent architect of fatigue, inflammation, and imbalance, reminding us that the most powerful forces shaping our health are often the ones so subtle we hardly notice them. The human body is an extraordinary system of adaptation, constantly adjusting to the environment and habits we create through our daily lives. It does not simply react to large events or sudden changes. Instead, it responds to repetition, to patterns that quietly define how we live each day. When a behavior is repeated often enough, the body begins to treat it not as an exception, but as a new normal. This process unfolds silently, beneath the surface of awareness, shaping long-term health through gradual biological changes that are rarely felt in the moment they begin. The body's ability to adapt is essential for survival. Yet this same ability can slowly work against us when our daily habits lean toward imbalance rather than support. Every action we take sends signals throughout the body. These signals influence how cells produce energy, repair damage, and communicate with one another. When movement becomes limited due to prolonged sitting or inactivity, muscles receive fewer signals to maintain strength and flexibility. Over time, they begin to conserve energy by reducing their capacity. Blood circulation adjusts to a lower demand, becoming less efficient. The metabolic system recalibrates to a slower pace, affecting how nutrients are processed and stored. None of these changes occur dramatically in a single day. They emerge through consistent repetition, through the quiet accumulation of similar days that slowly shape the body's internal environment. Within each cell, complex biochemical processes depend on balance and regular stimulation. When daily habits provide supportive signals, cells function with efficiency and resilience. When habits create imbalance, even in small ways, cells adjust to accommodate the new conditions. For example, repeated exposure to excess sugar can gradually influence how cells respond to insulin. Initially, the body compensates by producing more of the hormone to maintain balance. Over time, however, cells may become less responsive, requiring greater effort from the body to achieve the same result. This gradual shift is often invisible, unfolding without pain or obvious discomfort. Yet it lays the foundation for metabolic challenges that may appear much later. The nervous system is particularly sensitive to repetition. It learns through patterns, strengthening neural pathways that are used frequently and allowing others to weaken. When daily routines involve constant stimulation, multitasking, or digital overload, the brain adapts by maintaining a heightened state of alertness. This state can feel normal because it develops slowly. But beneath that sense of normalcy lies continuous activation of stress responses designed for short-term survival rather than long-term well-being. Over weeks and months, this persistent activation influences sleep quality, emotional regulation, and cognitive clarity. The brain, attempting to keep up with repeated demands, reshapes its functioning in ways that may gradually reduce resilience and focus. Adaptation also extends to posture and physical alignment. The way we sit, stand, and move each day communicates with muscles and joints, instructing them on how to distribute weight and maintain balance. When poor posture becomes habitual, certain muscles remain underused, while others become overworked. The spine adjusts to repeated positions, and connective tissues gradually change in response to consistent strain or compression. These changes are subtle at first, often felt only as mild tension or occasional discomfort. Over time, however, they can influence breathing patterns, circulation, and even energy levels, illustrating how small physical habits quietly shape structural health. One of the most fascinating aspects of the body's adaptation is its efficiency. It seeks to conserve energy whenever possible, adjusting to the demands placed upon it. If daily life requires little physical exertion, the body interprets this as a signal to reduce energy expenditure. Muscles become less metabolically active, and the cardiovascular system adapts to lower levels of activity. This conservation may seem beneficial in the short term, but over time it can lead to decreased stamina and reduced capacity for physical effort. When sudden demands arise, the body may struggle to respond, not because it is inherently weak, but because it has adapted to a lifestyle that rarely challenges it. Hormonal systems also respond to repeated behaviors with remarkable sensitivity. Eating patterns, sleep schedules, and stress levels all influence hormonal rhythms that regulate appetite, mood, and energy. When meals are irregular or sleep is inconsistent, these rhythms adjust in an attempt to maintain stability. The result may be subtle fluctuations in hunger, cravings, or fatigue that feel normal but reflect underlying shifts in hormonal balance. Because these changes occur gradually, they are often accepted as part of daily life rather than recognized as signals of adaptation. The immune system, too, learns from repetition. It responds to the overall environment created by lifestyle choices, including nutrition, stress, and rest. When the body experiences continuous low-level strain, the immune system may remain in a state of mild activation. This state can influence inflammation throughout the body, affecting tissues and organs in ways that accumulate slowly. The effects are rarely immediate, yet over time, they can contribute to a wide range of health concerns that seem to appear without clear cause. What makes these processes particularly complex is the body's ability to compensate. When one system is strained, others often adjust to maintain overall function. This compensation can mask early signs of imbalance, allowing daily life to continue without obvious disruption. However, compensation requires energy and resources. When repeated habits continue to challenge the body, the effort required to maintain balance gradually increases. Eventually, the systems responsible for compensation may become less effective, and symptoms that once remained hidden begin to surface. Awareness of this silent adaptation invites a more compassionate understanding of health. Rather than viewing the body as fragile or prone to sudden failure, it can be seen as responsive and adaptable, constantly adjusting to the signals it receives. Each small habit becomes a message, shaping biological processes over time. When these messages consistently support balance, the body adapts toward resilience and vitality. When they consistently create strain, the body adapts in ways that may gradually reduce its capacity for repair and renewal. In recognizing the power of repetition, we begin to see that long-term health is not determined by occasional dramatic actions, but by the quiet patterns woven into everyday life. Patterns that guide the body's continuous process of adaptation and change. Sleep is not merely a period of inactivity or rest. It is a highly orchestrated biological process that sustains every system in the body. Each night, the brain and body engage in a symphony of maintenance, repair, and reorganization. And when these processes are consistently disrupted, the effects ripple outward, influencing physical health, emotional stability, and cognitive performance. Chronic sleep disruption is rarely dramatic in the moment. It does not typically announce itself with loud alarms or immediate consequences, but it accumulates silently, gradually altering hormones, immune function, metabolism, and neural processes in ways that can have profound long-term consequences. The science of sleep reveals that even subtle disturbances, shifting bedtimes by an hour, sleeping fewer hours than needed, or waking repeatedly during the night, trigger biological adaptations that the body interprets as stress. These adaptations may feel tolerable at first, and the mind may convince itself that it is functioning normally. Yet the internal environment is quietly shifting in response to repeated sleep deprivation. The body's stress response is intimately tied to sleep patterns. Cortisol, the hormone often associated with alertness and the stress response, follows a daily rhythm, rising in the morning to prepare the body for activity and gradually declining as the day progresses to allow rest. When sleep is shortened or fragmented, this rhythm becomes distorted. The body compensates by maintaining elevated cortisol levels even during periods intended for restoration. This chronic elevation is subtle and often imperceptible, yet it exerts continuous pressure on multiple systems. Cardiovascular function, for example, becomes strained as the heart responds to persistently higher levels of stress hormones. Blood pressure may rise slightly. Repeated nightly disruptions accumulating into chronic patterns over weeks and months. The immune system, which relies on sleep to calibrate responses to threats, may remain in a state of low-level activation, producing inflammation that quietly influences tissues and organs throughout the body. Sleep is also critical for metabolic regulation. The hormones ghrelin and leptin, which control hunger and satiety, are highly sensitive to sleep quality and duration. When sleep is shortened, ghrelin increases, stimulating appetite, while leptin decreases, reducing the feeling of fullness. This imbalance encourages higher caloric intake, often from foods that are quickly digested and metabolically taxing. Over time, repeated nights of insufficient sleep influence glucose metabolism and insulin sensitivity, creating conditions that subtly strain the body's capacity to maintain healthy blood sugar levels. Even minor, consistent disruptions to sleep can gradually shift metabolic processes, contributing to weight gain, energy fluctuations, and an increased risk of conditions such as type 2 diabetes. Memory consolidation and neural repair are also dependent on uninterrupted sleep. During specific stages of sleep, particularly deep sleep and rapid eye movement, REM sleep, the brain processes experiences, strengthens neural connections, and clears metabolic waste. This cleansing process is essential for cognitive clarity, emotional resilience, and long-term brain health. When sleep is disrupted, the body may enter lighter stages of sleep more frequently, reducing the time spent in restorative phases. Neural waste, including potentially neurotoxic proteins, may accumulate more readily, subtly impairing cognitive function over time. Emotionally, the brain becomes more reactive. Amygdala activity, responsible for processing stress and fear, increases, while connections with prefrontal regions that regulate rational thought weaken. The result is heightened emotional reactivity, reduced patience, and difficulty managing stress, creating a feedback loop where poor sleep amplifies emotional strain, which in turn interferes with subsequent sleep. The interplay between sleep disruption and chronic stress is particularly significant. Modern life often encourages continuous engagement, screens, notifications, work pressures, reducing both the quantity and quality of restorative sleep. Even when sleep duration is adequate, the repeated interruptions or inconsistent schedules force the body to adapt as if living in a prolonged state of alertness. Heart rate remains elevated during rest periods. Muscles may fail to relax fully, and the nervous system operates in a state more akin to vigilance than restoration. Over time, this persistent activation shapes both the physiology and perception of daily life. Energy levels fluctuate unpredictably, focus diminishes, and resilience to external stressors declines. The body interprets these repeated disruptions as a pattern of demand, gradually recalibrating internal rhythms to accommodate the ongoing imbalance, often before the conscious mind recognizes any dysfunction. Sleep also influences the delicate hormonal balance beyond cortisol. Growth hormone, critical for tissue repair and regeneration, is primarily secreted during deep sleep. When sleep is fragmented or delayed, the timing and quantity of growth hormone release are altered, which can subtly influence muscle maintenance, skin repair, and overall cellular regeneration. Sex hormones, such as testosterone and estrogen, also respond to sleep quality. Repeated sleep loss can reduce their levels, affecting fertility, libido, and overall hormonal harmony. These changes are gradual and often invisible, yet they accumulate steadily with each disrupted night, silently influencing the body's structural and functional integrity. The immune system demonstrates an intricate sensitivity to sleep as well. During restful sleep, immune cells communicate more effectively. Cytokine production is regulated, and inflammatory responses are balanced. When sleep is consistently disturbed, the immune system may remain in a pro-inflammatory state, increasing vulnerability to infections, slowing tissue repair, and influencing the progression of chronic diseases. The effects are rarely immediate or dramatic, yet they reflect a continuous adaptation to the body's perceived need for heightened vigilance. This chronic inflammatory state can subtly contribute to cardiovascular strain, metabolic disturbances, and even neuroinflammation, linking disrupted sleep to a broad spectrum of long-term health risks. Beyond the physical systems, the behavioral consequences of chronic sleep disruption also reinforce its biological effects. Fatigue influences decision-making, reducing the likelihood of engaging in physical activity or preparing nutritious meals. Emotional regulation becomes more difficult, increasing stress levels that further disrupt subsequent sleep. Cognitive function diminishes, impairing memory, focus, and learning, which can amplify feelings of frustration or overwhelm. The body's adaptation to repeated sleep loss therefore extends not only to physiological processes but also to patterns of behavior that shape health in a continuous feedback loop, illustrating the intricate interplay between biology, psychology, and daily habit. The cumulative impact of these repeated nightly disruptions illustrates a central principle. The body does not rely on one perfect night of sleep to maintain balance, but on consistent patterns over time. Occasional sleep deprivation can often be recovered from, but repeated disturbances create adaptations that become increasingly resistant to correction. The nervous system recalibrates to anticipate stress rather than restoration. Metabolic processes adjust to altered hormonal signals, and immune function adapts to a state of low-level inflammation. Each disrupted night adds a small weight to the overall equilibrium of the body, shaping long-term health outcomes in ways that are subtle yet profound. Understanding this slow accumulation encourages awareness, prompting reflection on the routines that dictate sleep quality and the larger patterns of daily life that influence the body's capacity to repair, regenerate, and maintain balance. Every meal we consume and every movement we make carries with it a cascade of biological signals that the body interprets, often without our conscious awareness. Food is far more than calories or taste. It is information that instructs cells on how to function, repair, and communicate with one another. Nutrients are messengers, influencing hormone release, cellular metabolism, and gene expression, while physical activity sends signals through muscles, joints, and the nervous system that affect circulation, energy use, and tissue remodeling. The impact of these daily behaviors is cumulative, unfolding slowly over time, shaping resilience or vulnerability in ways that are rarely visible in the moment. Even small, seemingly inconsequential choices, skipping a walk, opting for a highly processed snack, or substituting fresh ingredients with convenience foods, trigger biochemical responses that, repeated daily, quietly alter the body's internal environment. When food lacks diversity or is dominated by refined sugars, unhealthy fats, or processed additives, the body's signaling pathways are affected in multiple ways. Blood glucose rises sharply after a sugary meal, prompting insulin release to shuttle glucose into cells for energy or storage. In the short term, the body compensates effectively, maintaining blood sugar levels within a healthy range. Over time, however, repeated spikes train cells to become less sensitive to insulin, gradually undermining the efficiency of glucose metabolism. This is not an instantaneous collapse of function, but a subtle recalibration that accumulates slowly. Energy levels fluctuate, appetite regulation becomes distorted, and the body's capacity to manage nutrients efficiently diminishes. Metabolic stress increases quietly, often without overt symptoms, while inflammatory pathways begin to activate at low levels, signaling that tissues are experiencing strain. The absence of nutrients critical for cellular repair and maintenance also produces subtle, cumulative effects. Vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants act as cofactors in enzymatic reactions that regulate metabolism, detoxification, and DNA repair. When these compounds are consistently missing from the diet, cellular processes must adapt, often by slowing repair mechanisms or reallocating resources to essential functions at the expense of optimization. Tissues gradually experience microdamage, inflammation rises, and resilience to stressors diminishes. These effects are rarely dramatic at first, but their repetition over months and years shifts the internal balance toward vulnerability, creating conditions where illness or fatigue emerges seemingly without warning. What feels like normal energy or occasional discomfort may, in fact, be the subtle result of repeated nutritional signals that have nudged the body's systems away from optimal function. Movement provides equally critical information to the body, influencing circulation, muscle tone, joint health, and even mental states. Physical activity generates mechanical stress in tissues, which signals cells to strengthen and adapt. Muscle fibers increase in size and efficiency. Bones remodel to support increased load, and connective tissues maintain elasticity in response to repeated use. Conversely, prolonged inactivity communicates a different message, that energy expenditure should be minimized. Muscles can conserve resources, and cardiovascular output can operate at a lower baseline. This adaptive response, while protective in the short term, gradually diminishes functional capacity. Circulation slows, metabolism declines, and muscular strength weakens. Even the nervous system interprets a sedentary lifestyle as a signal to adjust alertness and responsiveness. The cumulative effect is a body less capable of responding to sudden demands, with reduced capacity to recover from stress, injury, or illness. Physical activity and nutrition also intersect in their influence on inflammation and immune function. Muscles produce myokines during movement, signaling anti-inflammatory processes and modulating immune response. Regular exercise supports metabolic efficiency, vascular health, and the regulation of stress hormones. Similarly, nutrient-dense foods provide compounds that reduce oxidative stress, modulate inflammation, and support immune cell function. When either signal is weakened through poor diet or inactivity, inflammatory processes subtly increase. The body may not produce symptoms immediately, but chronic low-grade inflammation quietly affects blood vessels, metabolic tissues, and even neural structures. Over time, this invisible stress shapes disease risk, energy levels, and cognitive performance, illustrating how the interplay between food and movement governs overall physiological harmony. The rhythm of daily choices further influences hormonal signaling. Meals trigger the release of insulin, glucagon, and digestive hormones, while physical activity modulates cortisol, adrenaline, and growth hormone. Repeated patterns in eating and exercise train the body to anticipate certain energy inputs and outputs. When habits are irregular, skipping meals, overeating, or engaging in sporadic activity, these hormonal rhythms are disrupted. The body adapts by adjusting receptor sensitivity, hormone release patterns, and energy storage strategies. While these adaptations help maintain balance in the short term, they may gradually compromise metabolic flexibility, stress resilience, and tissue repair mechanisms. Each choice, repeated day after day, instructs the body on how to allocate resources, reinforcing patterns that can either support vitality or quietly erode health. Mental and emotional states are intertwined with food and movement signals. Nutrient deficiencies can affect neurotransmitter synthesis, influencing mood, focus, and emotional stability. Physical inactivity or overexertion can alter stress hormone levels, affecting cognitive clarity and mental resilience. In turn, these mental and emotional changes influence behavior, creating feedback loops that reinforce certain patterns. Someone fatigued or irritable may be less inclined to exercise, choose convenience foods, or prioritize sleep, perpetuating the biochemical signaling that contributes to further imbalance. Over time, these patterns solidify into habitual cycles that subtly shape long-term health outcomes, often without conscious recognition. Hydration and micronutrients play additional roles in signaling. Water is not just a medium for chemical reactions, but a messenger in itself, influencing circulation, kidney function, and cellular metabolism. Micronutrients such as magnesium, zinc, and B vitamins regulate enzymatic processes, nerve function, and DNA repair. Repeated deficits create adaptation, where cells compensate for the lack of resources by slowing non-essential processes, redirecting energy, and altering communication with other cells. The body can maintain this compensatory state for months or even years, making the consequences invisible in daily life but potent over the long term. Another dimension is the timing of choices. When meals, activity, and rest follow inconsistent patterns, circadian rhythms, the body's internal clock are disrupted. These rhythms govern hormone release, metabolic processes, and cellular repair. Misalignment between behaviors and circadian biology sends conflicting signals to cells, forcing them to adapt repeatedly to shifting conditions. Over time, this results in subtle inefficiencies in energy use, digestion, sleep quality, and hormonal balance. The body adjusts to accommodate the repeated disruptions. But this adaptation, while protective in the short term, slowly erodes resilience and capacity for recovery. The environment in which we live, work, and move is a continuous dialogue with our bodies, sending signals that our physiology interprets and responds to in ways that are often invisible, yet profoundly influential. Modern lifestyles have introduced patterns that subtly strain multiple systems without immediate recognition, from prolonged sitting and poor posture to shallow breathing and limited exposure to natural light. These factors, seemingly minor in isolation, accumulate over time, quietly reshaping circulation, metabolic efficiency, musculoskeletal integrity, and even cognitive and emotional states. The human body is designed to move, to experience gravity, to interact with a dynamic environment, and to synchronize with natural rhythms. And when these signals are consistently altered or absent, adaptation occurs. This adaptation is protective, allowing life to continue, yet it carries consequences that may emerge years later in the form of fatigue, inflammation, chronic pain, or diminished mental clarity. Prolonged sitting, a hallmark of modern work and leisure habits, is particularly instructive in demonstrating the body's adaptive response. When seated for extended periods, blood flow through the legs is reduced, venous return to the heart is slower, and metabolic processes in muscles are less active. The body interprets this low level of activity as a new baseline, gradually adjusting circulatory and metabolic efficiency to match. Muscle fibers, particularly in the gluts, hamstrings, and lower back, become less engaged and weaker over time. The spine adapts to support a posture that may be less than optimal, causing subtle changes in curvature and load distribution. Connective tissues such as ligaments and tendons slowly remodel to accommodate repetitive positions, and these structural shifts alter movement patterns, flexibility, and balance. The effects are cumulative, often going unnoticed until discomfort, stiffness, or reduced mobility signals that adaptation has reached a threshold where function is compromised. Breathing patterns illustrate another layer of subtle adaptation. Shallow, rapid breathing, common in sedentary or high-stress lifestyles, communicates to the nervous system that vigilance or tension is the default state. The diaphragm, a primary driver of effective respiration, becomes underutilized, while accessory muscles of the neck and chest take on a disproportionate role. Over time, this pattern reduces efficiency in oxygen exchange, limits lung capacity, and influences the balance of carbon dioxide and oxygen in the blood. The nervous system interprets these repeated signals as normal, which can perpetuate a cycle of low-level stress and elevated sympathetic nervous system activity. Chronic sympathetic activation contributes to increased heart rate, blood pressure, and stress hormone release, even in the absence of acute threats. The cumulative impact is subtle yet far-reaching, influencing both physical resilience and emotional regulation. Limited exposure to natural light is another environmental factor with profound effects on biological rhythms. Light is a primary cue for circadian cycles, governing hormone release, sleep-wake timing, and mood regulation. When daylight exposure is insufficient, the body interprets a prolonged period of darkness, delaying melatonin regulation and disrupting the synchronization of internal clocks. This can lead to delayed or fragmented sleep, hormonal imbalances, and changes in energy metabolism. The nervous system, reliant on predictable environmental cues, adapts to altered light patterns. But this adaptation often comes at the expense of optimal alertness, mood stability, and metabolic efficiency. Repeated daily misalignment between environmental cues and physiological expectations gradually reshapes internal timing mechanisms, affecting performance, cognitive function, and overall vitality. Posture and movement further communicate essential signals to the body. When poor posture becomes habitual, rounded shoulders, forward head position, or slouched sitting, the musculoskeletal system adapts structurally and functionally. Muscles that should provide support may weaken, while others become chronically tense. Joints may experience uneven load distribution, cartilage can wear unevenly, and spinal alignment gradually shifts. These adaptations are subtle, often unnoticeable in the moment, but over time, they influence breathing efficiency, core stability, and even nervous system signaling through changes in proprioception and neural feedback. Physical patterns, repeated daily, inform the body's understanding of what is safe, normal, and expected, reinforcing habits that can either support strength or erode functional capacity. Environmental stressors are not limited to physical factors. The body also responds to patterns of psychological and social engagement. Chronic exposure to low-level stress, noise, or demanding cognitive work communicates that vigilance is necessary. The hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis responds to repeated signals by adjusting cortisol release, affecting energy distribution, immune function, and neural processes. Even if the conscious mind does not perceive harm, the body operates in a state of subtle adaptation, preparing for challenges that may be psychological rather than physical. This persistent adaptation shapes inflammatory processes, alters metabolic activity, and can influence both cardiovascular and gastrointestinal function. The environment, therefore, is not neutral. It continuously instructs biological systems on how to allocate resources and respond to perceived demands. Hydration, air quality, and temperature also function as environmental signals that the body interprets and responds to continuously. Inadequate water intake affects blood viscosity, kidney function, and thermoregulation. Poor air quality triggers subtle inflammatory responses in respiratory tissues and circulatory systems. Repeated exposure to non-ideal temperatures prompts thermoregulatory adaptations that may increase metabolic strain or alter cardiovascular function. These environmental influences, while often unnoticed, send persistent messages to physiological systems, requiring continuous adjustment. Over months and years, the body's adaptation to these signals shapes efficiency, resilience, and vulnerability in ways that remain largely invisible until cumulative effects manifest as fatigue, illness, or functional decline. The cumulative effect of these repeated environmental influences demonstrates a fundamental principle. The body is constantly interpreting context and responding accordingly. Every posture, every breath, every exposure to light or movement conveys information that instructs adaptation. The body's remarkable ability to adjust ensures survival in varied circumstances. Yet repeated signals that deviate from optimal conditions gradually shift internal systems away from peak performance. These adaptations are protective in the short term, but can accumulate to subtly compromise long-term health and vitality. Awareness of these patterns allows for intentional choices that reinforce supportive signals, promoting alignment with biological design rather than chronic strain. Understanding the body as a responsive organism emphasizes the importance of consistency in daily behavior. Small adjustments in movement, posture, breathing, and exposure to natural rhythms can reinforce optimal adaptation, while repeated deviations silently shape physiology toward compromise. The body does not respond to occasional extremes as much as it responds to patterns, interpreting repeated environmental cues as normative. By paying attention to these subtle influences, it becomes possible to guide adaptation consciously, encouraging systems to maintain strength, flexibility, metabolic efficiency, and emotional resilience. Each environmental signal, repeated and acknowledged, becomes a conversation with the body, one in which small changes accumulate into profound improvements or, conversely, quite damage if neglected. The human body possesses an extraordinary capacity for repair and restoration, a capacity that is often underestimated because it operates quietly, continuously, and without dramatic fanfare. Every choice we make, repeated consistently over time, becomes a signal to the body, instructing it to adapt toward resilience or vulnerability. Small positive choices, though subtle in isolation, accumulate like gentle drops that carve valleys, gradually shaping physiology in profound ways. Movement, nutrition, rest, hydration, and mindfulness are not merely isolated behaviors. They are ongoing conversations with the body, sending messages that influence cellular repair, hormonal balance, immune function, and neural plasticity. The cumulative effect of these choices can support the body's inherent regenerative processes, reinforcing systems that sustain energy, vitality, and emotional equilibrium over a lifetime. Movement is one of the most direct ways to send restorative signals to the body. Regular physical activity stimulates circulation, improving oxygen and nutrient delivery to tissues, enhancing the function of the cardiovascular system and supporting efficient metabolic activity. Muscles, joints, and connective tissues respond to repeated mechanical stress by strengthening, becoming more resilient to injury, and maintaining flexibility. Even moderate daily movement, repeated consistently, triggers biochemical signals known as myokines that influence systemic inflammation, insulin sensitivity, and brain function. These signals act quietly, but their accumulation supports tissue repair and resilience, helping the body maintain optimal function long before obvious signs of decline appear. Through repetition, movement trains the body to expect and respond to challenges, creating a foundation for health that is both preventive and restorative. Nutrition functions similarly, providing the essential materials that cells need to repair, regenerate, and communicate effectively. Consuming a diet rich in whole foods, including vegetables, fruits, lean proteins, healthy fats, and micronutrients, sends consistent signals that the body interprets as an environment of abundance and balance. Nutrients act as cofactors in enzymatic reactions, regulate gene expression, and influence hormone release. When these signals are repeated daily, they enable cells to optimize energy production, repair oxidative damage, and maintain structural integrity. Even small adjustments, such as choosing fiber-rich foods, reducing refined sugars, or incorporating nutrient-dense meals, accumulate over time to reinforce the body's natural processes of maintenance. Each positive choice, though seemingly minor, adds a layer of support to cellular function, helping to counteract prior patterns of strain or neglect. Rest and sleep provide another critical dimension to the body's restorative capacity. During sleep, neural and hormonal systems recalibrate. Growth hormone, critical for tissue repair, is released predominantly during deep sleep stages, facilitating muscle maintenance, cellular renewal, and metabolic regulation. Sleep also supports cognitive function, memory consolidation, and emotional processing. Consistently prioritizing restorative sleep signals the body that recovery is expected and achievable, reinforcing patterns that maintain hormonal balance, reduce inflammation, and enhance immune function. Even small adjustments, such as maintaining a regular sleep schedule or creating an environment conducive to rest, contribute cumulatively to the body's ability to repair itself. Over weeks and months, these repeated choices strengthen the internal architecture of health, helping the body resist the gradual wear and tear that accompanies modern life. Hydration, often overlooked, is another subtle yet powerful signal. Water is essential for circulation, cellular metabolism, detoxification, and thermoregulation. Regular and sufficient hydration ensures that cells can function efficiently, enzymes can operate optimally, and tissues can maintain elasticity and resilience. When water intake is consistent, the body interprets this as a supportive environment, reducing physiological stress and allowing metabolic processes to function without unnecessary strain. Small, repeated choices to maintain hydration, even in modest increments throughout the day, accumulate over time, contributing to systemic stability, improved energy levels, and enhanced cognitive clarity. The body responds not only to acute hydration, but to the steady rhythm of consistent intake, reinforcing a foundation for long-term health. Mindfulness and stress management also communicate restorative signals to the body. Practices such as deep breathing, meditation, gentle stretching, and intentional pauses reduce sympathetic nervous system activation, modulate cortisol release, and support parasympathetic activity, which promotes digestion, cellular repair, and immune function. Repeated engagement with these practices trains the nervous system to tolerate stress more effectively, regulate inflammation, and maintain balance across multiple organ systems. Over time, these consistent behavioral patterns influence not just mental well-being, but physical resilience, demonstrating that the body's capacity for restoration is deeply intertwined with emotional and cognitive signals. Small, repeated moments of mindfulness become a scaffolding for both physiological and psychological strength, reinforcing adaptive patterns rather than reactive stress responses. The cumulative power of small positive choices is also evident in the way habits interact with one another. Consistent movement enhances appetite regulation, encouraging better food choices. Proper nutrition supports energy levels, enabling more consistent physical activity. Restorative sleep improves mental clarity, reinforcing adherence to healthy routines. These interrelated patterns create a feedback loop, where one positive choice amplifies the effect of another, enhancing the overall restorative capacity of the body. Even minor adjustments, repeated consistently, accumulate to create systemic benefits that are greater than the sum of individual actions. The body interprets these patterns as signals of stability and predictability, optimizing repair, recovery, and resilience at multiple levels. Biological systems thrive on consistency, and the quiet accumulation of supportive choices is what allows the body to maintain equilibrium in the face of daily stressors. Cells interpret repeated signals as information about the environment, adjusting gene expression, protein synthesis, and metabolic pathways accordingly. Hormones align with expected patterns, supporting energy balance, tissue repair, and stress resilience. The immune system calibrates itself to maintain defense without overactivation, while the nervous system adapts to manage physiological and emotional responses effectively. Each small, repeated choice functions as a message, shaping these systems toward optimal function. Over time, the cumulative effect is profound, creating a body that is more resilient, adaptable, and capable of maintaining vitality well into later years. The restorative potential of consistent positive choices highlights a central principle. Health is less about occasional dramatic interventions and more about the quiet, repeated actions that shape internal signals day by day. The body is inherently regenerative, capable of remarkable adaptation when provided with reliable, supportive input. Every walk taken, every nutritious meal consumed, every night of adequate sleep, every mindful pause, and every sip of water contributes to a subtle but powerful pattern of signaling that reinforces the body's natural processes. The accumulation of these signals creates a foundation for resilience, enabling the body to recover from stress, repair damage, and maintain function even in the face of environmental and physiological challenges. The ongoing dialogue between consistent behavior and biological adaptation demonstrates that wellness is cultivated through repeated care, where small choices, compounded over time, quietly but decisively shape long-term health outcomes.